Good morning, everybody. John Spielke here from GAI Insights, bringing you the GenAI news briefing, rating essential, important, or optional articles for our AI leader. Today, we have a big crowd. We got most of the team on, and David's going to lead us through what is going to be an interesting day of news.
Yeah, thanks, John. We have quite a variety of topics that we'll cover today. We're going to explore whether the verticalization of LLMs and chatbots is happening versus the general purpose ChatGPT variety taking center stage at this point. We have an interesting article from Anthropic about the need for third-party testing on models. And we will also look at some amazing videos created by some specific folks in the industry that OpenAI commissioned to work with their Sora tool. And those are just stunning. And I'm looking forward to pulling those up when we talk about them. But first, we will discuss this article we have here. Ankaj, kick us off.
Thanks, David. So the first one that we have for today is from Eliyan, a startup which has raised $60 million for a chiplet that interconnects AI chips to speed them up.
All right, Adam, this one got deeply technical on me very fast, and I have to say my eyes started crossing, and I felt like
I'm gonna keep it pretty high level.
The reporter maybe just kind of took the press release and like plopped it into here rather than try to translate it a little bit for us, but maybe you could translate it for us.
Yeah, so I mean, this news is optional. It's important that they continue to find advancements. I mean, in simplistic terms, if I understand it correctly, when you start connecting these chips together, the bottleneck becomes the bridge or the gateway between them. And they're building the thing that'll bridge that faster, more efficiently at lower cost, using less power. So it's important that this kind of stuff continues to advance. It's good that there's funding in it. The news itself, I would consider optional.
All right. Any other thoughts around the horn here?
Agreed. If the leader is interested, then you could read more about this, because we focus on NVIDIA comes out with a chip with 200 billion transistors and so many more transistors, but in fact, latency between the transistors even starts to become an issue when you're building things this small. Speed of light starts to matter. And when you get between chips, same thing. When you get between systems, same thing. That's why racks become so incredibly sophisticated in the way even that they run the cables to try and minimize the length of the cables. All this stuff matters and can matter more than the compute power. So it does make a difference, but it's pretty arcane unless you are into the hardware. One more reason to design the hardware for the software rather than vice versa, because
I was going to say that's one of the big things I understand about NVIDIA's new Blackwell, right? When he was showcasing the one that had two of those chips on it, he said they behave as one, and there is no memory wall between them. So I think they still have the edge there, but this will help some of the other chip providers.
Yeah, I mean, they can go down to 3 nanometers, right? They had 65 or 64 gigs in terms of the bus throughput. I mean, I think the other thing is that the fact that just a real commitment, and I think it's been around for a while, but we're starting to see really built in terms of multiprocessor architectures to drive performance, because we're so close to the limits on Moore's law. Anyway, fascinating, but optional.
Fascinating but optional is a good way to wrap that one up. Ankaj, what do we have next?
Okay, so the next one is an article from HBR, which talks about how generative AI is already redefining roles in various fields.
All right, we'll start with Tanya, but John seems to have a relationship with this author.
So right before the call, we were debating whether we should review this or not. So the article is an optional article. There's nothing, revolutionary or new in content. However, there are some good concepts, I think, worth, reviewing when you have the time. One is, we all know that Gen AI is going to impact knowledge workers, right? So the article makes the case that rather than thinking of it as, hey, it's going to displace the knowledge worker, it's going to, again, augment, right? Make it for the knowledge worker to be able to get their work done faster, with better quality. And so the article goes through several examples of how they divided groups of people. One group was given ChatGPT, the other group was not. And each one of these examples, each one of these studies, they discovered that those who had access to the tool performed better, either faster, better quality. If you were someone with not as much experience, you did better, you felt better about your job, and the customer felt, that they got better service. And they went through cases of, college educated writers, lawyers being asked to look at different use cases, customer service, software development, through all these different use cases. And what I found interesting about the article was this concept of job crafting, right? So that's the framework they used for the study. And that basically means that, we should, we do better when we self-direct how we do our work based on our needs and our skills. And so we should take this similar approach when we apply generative AI. So as leaders of organization, the two things you can take out of the article is train your employees, not exactly on this is how you use Gen AI, but, explore it, right? Have fun with it. We're not going to tell you exactly how to use it because there's still some creativity. There's still some knowledge worker type of activities that need to happen on how to use it. So train your employees. And then the second is trust, build trust. So we want to allow employees to explore this, but not feel like, oh, this is going to displace me. So those are two takeaways for the leader that listens to our show and reads our articles. But overall, I gave it an optional.
Very nice.
Can I give it an optional with annoyed? Look, I know Miriam a little bit. She's a professor of MIS, and this brings us a flabbier, less rigorous HBR. I mean, there's a whole school of thought in technology implementation called social technical systems design. Let me just read you the top 5 issues: joint optimization, adaptability, participative design, total systems, and quality of work life. This has been in the MIS field and in the technology field for, I'm 60, for, I don't know, at least as long as I've been around, and it's just nuts. Anyway, it annoys me. It pulls out one really obvious thing, does a once over lightly meta-analysis of other people's work, and says something really obvious. And I think in general brings down the brand of the Harvard Business Review. But that's me.
Wow, slightly scathing there. All right.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue. I would say there's one thing here. I'm always skeptical of sort of the pseudoscience of case study, but one thing that seems consistent across the studies, and we've heard this before, is that newbies, people who have less skill, benefit more than people who have more skill, which suggests that there is a big untapped potential here, both good and bad for the humans involved, for places like McDonald's or fast food retailers or almost any institution where there's either high turnover or a large gap between the knowledge of experts and new employees. And that makes it easier, by the way, to lay off employees because the cost of turnover is suddenly lowered potentially.
And the other side of that coin, Tim, is that the very experienced employees, right, who have to train the newbies, their time also, they get to get some of that time back.
Relief.
Yes.
Right. If the new employees hang around.
That's right. All right. Well, good discussion around an optional article. And we will move on to the next one.
So the next one is a research paper which highlights how we can evaluate and teach information retrieval models to follow instructions.
All right, Tim, did you give this the full read?
Yeah, I would call this optional. It's an interesting idea. Again, we're learning a lot about how little we understand about how these models work. And we've seen, again, things like this before where simple changes in prompts cause significant changes in the quality of the output. And this is another along those lines. We're trying to be a little more rigorous about it, but it's the same basic story, which is if you understand prompt techniques in certain ways, you can get better results. The problem is the underlying models are also changing very rapidly, so I'm skeptical how long any of these will be valuable. And I'm also skeptical because there's no model. It's just sort of randomly trying certain things and saying, oh, this seems to work better. It's okay. It's not a bad thing to do. That's engineering versus science. Engineering doesn't care how things work. They just care that it does work. So it's good from that perspective, but optional, in my opinion.
All right. Any other thoughts from the gang here?
Yeah, I would agree with optional because it doesn't quite make a stance on the metrics of evaluation, but it is trying to put together a framework to do it, to do the evaluation of how well the prompts are understood and pairwise comparison. And yeah, so, but it is not there yet. There are others who are also chewing on that, I guess. But it's a move in the right direction, let's put it this way. So it's important in that way.
All right. Everybody seems to be in full agreement on these today. No debates. We will go optional. Next.
Yep. So the next one is around how ChatGPT hasn't grown its subscriber base, and also how we are seeing the verticalization of GenAI.
All right, John, start us off.
Yeah, I love this thing. I think it's important or essential, and the reason is that it's funny if you think ChatGPT sells intelligence, which I think they do. Intelligence sits in lots of places, right? It sits in verticals. It sits in as a partial piece of a solution when you're trying to get something done. So I think it's really cool, this notion of unbundling ChatGPT. I was a little surprised at how flat the use is. And that will bring all kinds of lazy journalists out of the woodwork and say, see, we told you it was hype cycle, which is just not the point at all. This is about the dispersion of intelligence into all these different things. I think is fantastic, and I think it's super important for our. I'm gonna go ahead with essential. I'm gonna let loose the dogs of war here, whatever. And let's go for essential because it's the AI leader needs to understand that this stuff is super important to have the major mega centralized utility, but then intelligence is like life. It goes everywhere, so I think it's a really cool, quick read in terms of what the numbers are. I like this guy's tone, a little irreverent, or Gail's tone, whatever, person's tone. And I think they're right that the growth is going to happen in both places.
All right. We have a stake in the ground on essential. Anybody want to debate that and take it down a notch?
Yeah.
Either way. Oh, go ahead, Luda.
Tanya, if you want to proceed, go.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's definitely important. I mean, we can argue essential or not, but it's definitely important because, I'm amazed, right? ChatGPT just went out there with a product that had all these issues at the beginning, and they went for it, right? And now they're the masters at both sides, right? One, everybody, we do have a lot of people using it. They might say it's stagnant, but still, right? It's the world using it. And yet they still have cornered the market also for the vertical side, right? So they have mastered, by being the first, they have entered both sides. They can be the providers of all of these different tools because they become the app store, right, of GPT. They're not stopping verticalization, especially, the specialization that are happening with startups. They're in the game there as well. So to me, it's just, I don't know, it's just an amazing how they've been able to navigate all of this. So from that perspective, I think it's definitely an important read.
Yeah, Luda, what were you going to add there?
Well, I was going to go for optional because the takeaway here is that ChatGPT is enabling all these startups that are going vertical or functional specific. So, and that's the point. We kind of know, we've been talking about it, and it's an obvious point. The only reason to give it an importance is this chart. It summarizes the various things. It probably not all-inclusive for sure, but it does represent what has happened in a very, very quick manner in the market, and that's important to see. So that's where I end up.
Yep.
All over the map here.
Yeah, you can talk about it for an hour and a half. I could be talked into important. There's so much going on here. I think John made some good points. I think Luda made some good points. The question about where this is going is so wide open right now. Again, I view this whole market as a dog catches car kind of market where they did not realize at all how, like ChatGPT, the OpenAI, I'm sure did not expect there to have 100 million users in a month. And the question about whether that's flat, well, if you get 200 million users in a couple of months, maybe you don't need much growth after that for a long time. Plus, they're not measuring revenue as far as I can tell. So to Luda's point, if lots of other people are using it as a platform and paying API fees, what really counts is the revenue much more than the number of users. So it's just a million things we don't know. We've all talked about verticalization. That's a great theory. It's going to happen. But you should read David Epstein's book, Range, great book, which talks about the need for general purpose intelligence in a society of specialization. And there's a lot to be said for that. We just don't know. There's just a million things going on. Things are changing so fast. Look what just happened to inflection. So anyway, so I would say I can be talked into important.
All right. It sounds like people were relatively comfortable with important, and it splits it down the middle. I'm sorry, John. Nobody really latched on to your central argument here. So
No.
Thank you for opening up a debate where we all actually disagreed on one, since we were all kind of one mind today. All right, so we will mark this as important and go on to the next.
Okay. The next one is from Anthropic. So Anthropic has proposed a third-party testing as key ingredient of AI policy.
Yeah, I mean, don't we do third-party testing and AI models in general? So of course we should do it here, but that's my 2-second opinion. Luda.
Yes, it's a hugely important topic, and my hat goes to Anthropic here. This is a post, and it's a call for a third-party testing entity. They have been doing this in number of posts, in white papers, in letters of various sorts. So I really applaud them for doing so. This post makes a case why it is important. What would that look like? What would this focus on? Who might be the bodies who might take the baton? What the funding is needed? So it's an important article. I would give it an important. For our audience, what I would say is just we need more business leaders to vote with on this thing. Essentially, a platform to make a broader call to put a body, and the article suggests the NIST entity to take a lead. And I kind of agree that this is the right place to take the lead. And they kind of look at pluses and minuses. You can make it too stringent, and how to go in a balanced way. So I like the article. It's a little bit of a longer read, but I still put it as important.
All right, I see a head nod from Tanya. Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
I'd give this an optional myself. I mean, it's interesting. I applaud Anthropic in general because they put a little bit more thought into this. I'm skeptical that commercial entities can really rid themselves of their inherent conflicts and biases. It's a good idea. I think I've made the analogy before of generative AI to security, and in security, we have red teams and other folks outside of it's like almost an obvious thing. You need somebody outside to poke at these things. But it's a long read and doesn't say anything all that different than what you would think of as the obvious stuff.
I think it unimportant. I agree with Luda. I think this topic is very important, especially because, as we said before, right, things are still changing, and on the regulation and policy thing side, things are still evolving. And so, if you are a small company, and the article talks about this, if you are a small company, and all of a sudden, these big policies and these big testing regulations and things are required, you might not be able to survive in this market, right? So, I think we need to think of testing, think of a stamp of approval, whether it's the government that gives it or private third-party companies, that is applicable to large companies, small companies. And I mean, it might be difficult, and I think the article is saying that it's not an easy thing, because we're asking people to make their models open and how decisions are being made, and that may also be your competitive advantage. I do think it's something we need to figure out. And so I just like Luda said, I mean, I think that them taking a stance on this topic is commendable.
All right, and Michael,
right, that the industry might not take it on, right? So, but the more we flag it that it's unaddressed, important topic that needs to have a body of people thinking about it is critical. I think.
All right, and then I think Michael Novak agrees, which makes me again want to go ahead and put it in important. He notes, to have confidence in any of these models, right? We need to be doing this. So it's better for the business, right? It's better for everybody involved. Agree, it was a little bit of a long read, but definitely worth a skim at least. So we will say an important skim. And then we will go on to this last one, which I'm most excited about just because I want to see the videos again because they're just crazy. Go ahead, Ankaj.
Sure, David. So the last one is from OpenAI, and particularly OpenAI's Sora model. So OpenAI collaborated with various creative people to create videos through Sora, and there are really interesting videos which were generated by very creative people.
That's right, Adam. What'd you think? You're probably chomping at the bit to get this tool in your hands.
I'm over it. Listen, okay. I commented as such on a Reddit thread today about this topic. Look, even in the article earlier tonight, the one about the unbundling of ChatGPT, we're seeing this announcement hype from OpenAI, right? They talked about a new advanced data analysis version 2. They talked about a new persistent memory. They're showcasing this amazing video tool, but they're not actually giving these things to people, right? I feel like they have all of these cards they're holding close to their vest, and it's just, I'm getting a little tired of all the hype, frankly, from OpenAI without actually delivering. Meanwhile, the tools themselves, like GPT-4, the context window keeps getting clogged with a longer system prompt. The thing's getting lazier. Like they have such a competitive advantage that I don't think they need to move quicker. What I thought was interesting, and in some ways also makes me less impressed by Sora, is their finding is that it's really good for making things that aren't real, which in a way is nice. But when you look through these videos, they're all very surreal kind of takes on filmmaking, and it's cool. I loved some of the videos, but when you think of this as a tool for, as we discussed, potentially creating video to train robots, when you think about it as a tool potentially to model the real world, and then their takeaways and their findings from the early testing are, well, it's really best if you use it to make things that don't exist. It knocks it down a peg in my book. I think this is more hype. They're just getting people excited. I also understand it's going to take, I've heard 15 to 20 minutes to render a minute of video, and Lord only knows what that's going to cost the people who use the GPU compute. We haven't even seen any of the numbers. I just wish people would stop talking about it until they actually made it available. So I'm calling this optional.
All right, Adam, taking a stand. I mean, I would say it's, think about it, right? Even with the text tools, right? It's best at creating content, right? Creating creative content, unless you apply RAG and try to do all these things to give it guardrails, right? So it's kind of makes sense that text to video is the same animal, right?
One other thing, I'm really hopeful that Runway, as well as Stability that makes stable video, bring something to market that can compete, and soon. so that it forces their hand and they need to at least start making this available.
Yeah, I rate it as optional too, but I loved it. My undergraduate degree is in sculpture, and Rene Magritte, I don't know if you know his work, but the French surrealist, he had this great quote. He said, "Every man has the unalienable right to have total freedom for 24 hours a day." And I wonder, what would Magritte do with this stuff? And then down in the thing, the guy's done something which I've fantasized about doing, but he's actually doing it now, where he's doing 3D artwork with this thing, and then he feeds it to a robot, and the robot carves the marble. And it's just beautiful. Anyway, so optional, but man, what fun!
It's optional. It's an ad. It's a good ad.
Yeah,
but it's an ad.
And, what the heck,
again,
man? It's just like, I want that robot. That's what I want to do.
Yeah,
Forget this,
it's a very
AI stuff. I
effective
want
ad.
to go do that stuff.
Very effective ad. It makes the point, as Adam said, and everybody's, I think, saying here that these things are better at the unreal than the real, which is potentially a big issue that we've talked about on and off a little bit. So we'll see. The jury's still out.
I just think
the creative partner role is clearly a big one for all of these tools. Huge advances in the ability to create. And this is a demonstration of it. And I'm sure, again, there were lots more videos made that probably weren't so interesting. Maybe videos trying to be more realistic. And they said, this isn't our niche for this thing right now. Our niche for this thing is surreal videos, and they're awesome. So let's put a few on display.
Yeah, I hear you. I agree with Adam's, critique that, hey, this is more overhang than delivery and all that stuff, and that's annoying. But at the same time, I think it's kind of cool. We're going back to what we were saying the other day. You got 70 million people on Roblox. 28 million of them are under 12 and under. They had that, rendering engine for avatars. More and more reality is going to be the Autodesk, motto: read, understand, write. It's going to be, and it's going to deposit itself back, whether it's in bits, in videos, whether it's in physical world with atoms, whether it's in a biological world with cells and genes. It's gonna get funky.
We just have to be careful that we don't train the kids that the artificial world's more interesting than the real one, and we forget to solve any problems in the real world.
I think that horse has left the barn with video games. So video games born have already taken us there.
Yeah, not sure I'd argue with that. Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to put the horse back in the barn by being able to make sculptures and stuff that lives and whatever.
All right, so we go super optional, and I will say too, with my marketing hat on, I feel like OpenAI got away with not doing real marketing for a while, and I think it's the time where they actually need it, and I don't see this as a good display of that personally. Although they're cool to watch, it would be interesting.
Well, they could also be trying to convince Hollywood this is a good idea because they're a little bit at odds with Hollywood.
Yeah, they're laying the groundwork, right? They're laying the groundwork here with this. Okay, so super optional on this one, but if you have a few minutes and want to look at the videos, I thought they were pretty cool. So we have just two importance. Heavy debate on one of them, the unbundling of ChatGPT, and also the article calling for third-party testing from Anthropic, and everything else we have is optional. So real light reading day, but great debate. It was good to have a large crew on today, and look at us, we stayed in our time frame as well. John, anything to end on?
Nope, nothing to end on. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
All right. See y'all then. Bye.